Imagine spending like $1 billion to create the most lavish, just visually stunning fantasy epic in human history, and then write, only to have your viewership numbers completely obliterated by an old man bumbling around his farm in a tractor.
It is a staggering juxtaposition. I mean, it really is. And it perfectly captures the absolute chaos surrounding one of the most expensive entertainment properties ever produced.
Yeah. So welcome to our latest deep dive. Today we are unpacking a highly critical, incredibly intense piece of commentary regarding Amazon's Rings of Power, specifically looking ahead to their upcoming third season.
Right.
And we got a stack of notes from this really fiery source material today. But I want to be clear up front, our mission today is not to review the show ourselves.
No, far from it. We are dissecting the anatomy of a fandom inferno, really.
Yeah.
We want to understand why this specific adaptation has triggered such a monumental divide. So we'll be breaking down the author's arguments regarding, the business strategy, the severe deviations from the original lore, and the underlying cultural grievances driving this whole backlash.
Because reading through this commentary, it feels less like a traditional TV critique and more like, a legal indictment.
Yes.
It's written by a deeply disappointed superfan who is essentially holding the studio accountable for crimes against fiction.
Absolutely.
And to understand the sheer scale of that anger, we have to start with the balance sheet.
Right.
Because our source points out that back in 2017, Amazon paid $250 million.
And that wasn't to produce the show.
No, that was $250 million just to acquire the rights to the appendices of the Lord of the Rings books.
Right. And let's break down what that actually means, because it is crucial context. The appendices are essentially the footnotes, timelines, and, genealogies tucked at the back of The Return of the King.
Yeah, they're not a novel.
Exactly. They offer a broad strokes histories of the Second Age, but they are not a narrative novel. The studio didn't buy the rights to the Silmarillion or Unfinished Tales, which contain the actual detailed stories of this era.
So they essentially paid $250 million for a historical timeline, meaning, by definition, they have to invent massive amounts of filler to turn those bullet points into a multi-season television show. Right,
and our source frames this entire endeavor not as some artistic pursuit, but as a bloated vanity project.
Yeah.
They claim the show has lost, 60% of its audience across successive seasons.
Wow.
And that brings us back to the tractor.
Clarkson's farm.
Yes. The source highlights that in the UK, this billion-dollar fantasy epic was beaten handily in the ratings by Jeremy Clarkson's reality show about agricultural mishaps on that same streaming platform.
That is just brutal. And for the source, this isn't just a ratings dip. I mean, it's a profound humiliation that dictates every logistical decision the studio makes. Just look at the upcoming release schedule for Season 3. The source notes it's set to premiere on November 11th. Dropping 4 episodes all at once.
Right out of the gate.
Right. Half the season, just boom. Then the rest drops 2 episodes at a time over the next 3 weeks.
Which is really interesting because think about how you, as a listener, consume media these days.
Yeah.
When a show drops all at once, you binge it in a weekend, you might talk about it on Monday, and it's faded from the cultural conversation by Wednesday.
Right. You've moved on.
Yeah. And the source argues Amazon is weaponizing that exact psychology. They view this compressed release strategy as preemptive damage control.
The theory is fascinating, honestly, because if you release 1 episode a week for 2 months, you open yourself up to 2 solid months of negative press, critical YouTube breakdowns, bad recaps.
Absolutely, yeah.
But if you condense the entire season into 3 weeks, you artificially inflate those initial binge viewership numbers and severely minimize the duration of the negative backlash.
Right. But if those numbers are really that grim, and the studio is actively trying to compress the news cycle, you would think their immediate reflex would be to course correct the actual story.
You would think so. But the source points out their creative strategy moving forward is actually raising more red flags.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The commentary is merciless toward the showrunners, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. The author labels them bad reboot rejects, emphasizing that their primary previous experience was merely a partial, uncredited writing stint on a Star Trek film.
Ouch.
Yeah. The implication is that they were fundamentally unqualified to manage a legacy-defining intellectual property. And, their plans for Season 3 only confirm that suspicion for the source.
Yeah, and the primary piece of evidence there is this massive planned 5-year time jump.
Right.
the showrunners have been quoted saying that you don't even need to watch seasons 1 and 2 to jump into season 3.
Which is wild for a serialized show.
Right. They claim it starts in a brand new spot and offers a jolt of adrenaline. Now, if I put on my PR hat, that just sounds like standard marketing spin to lower the barrier to entry for new viewers. You know, like, hey, didn't watch the slow stuff. Come on in. The water's fine.
Sure, that is how a publicist would frame it. But consider the context of a show that has already aggressively compressed thousands of years of mythological lore into a very tight timeline just to keep its human characters alive.
Right.
To suddenly jump forward 5 years while simultaneously telling audiences they can skip the first 2 seasons? Well, the source reads that as a stunning confession of creative bankruptcy.
Oh, 100%. They are essentially interpreting it as the creators admitting the foundational narrative was so boring that even they are eager to abandon it.
Which brings us to the emotional core of this entire backlash.
Yeah, the lore.
Right. It's not just about pacing issues or PR spin or even the billions spent. The source argues the creators haven't just adapted the lore, they've mutated it into a repurposed fanfic soap opera.
Let's talk about Galadriel, because she is really the epicenter of this frustration.
Oh, absolutely.
In Tolkien's text, she is described as a 6'3" mother and wife. You know, an ancient, ethereal being who represents the absolute epitome of feminine beauty, grace, and wisdom.
Right.
But the show strips all of that away. Our source describes the television version as an armor-clad, petulant single warrior who gets fired by her own people.
Which is crazy.
Right. Wanders the ocean without a map for 1,000 years, and then just randomly bumps into Sauron on a raft.
And the narrative choices surrounding that raft encounter are heavily critiqued. Specifically, the romantic tension introduced between Galadriel and the Dark Lord.
The source makes this wild but highly effective analogy. They say shipping Galadriel and Sauron romantically is like adapting the Bible and deciding to make the Virgin Mary fall in love with Satan.
Wow. I mean, while hyperbolic, it perfectly illustrates the severity of the perceived transgression.
Yeah.
To fans steeped in this lore, characters like Galadriel are mythological deities.
Right, they're untouchable.
Exactly. Their alignments are absolute. Altering their fundamental nature feels like sacrilege. And according to the source, the soap opera elements are only amplifying in season 3.
Oh yeah, the love triangle. Celeborn, Galadriel's husband, is finally returning.
Right.
And the source asks the obvious question, where has he been for 1,000 years while his wife was experiencing romantic tension with the Dark Lord on a raft?
Apparently he was just in prison.
Just hanging out in prison. And the showrunners have actually confirmed there will be a love triangle dynamic between Celeborn, Galadriel, and Sauron.
It completely shifts the genre of the world.
It's like taking a sprawling, serious historical documentary about the Roman Empire and suddenly injecting reality TV dating drama to retain viewership.
Who will get the final rose, the emperor or the gladiator?
Exactly. You fundamentally break the tone.
And that tonal breakage is accompanied by a host of mechanical lore violations that just infuriate the source. Some seem minor but point to a lack of care, like Celebrimbor, supposedly the greatest elven smith in history, somehow not knowing what a basic metal alloy is.
Oh, right.
Or others that disrupt the timeline, like Elrond kissing Galadriel, a woman who, in the established lore, becomes his future mother-in-law.
Which is just awkward.
Very. Or the wizard Gandalf appearing in the Second Age, which is thousands of years before he is supposed to arrive in Middle-earth.
Then there is Mount Doom. The commentary openly mocks the show's depiction of how this apocalyptic volcano was created.
Oh, the key.
Yeah. Instead of primordial cataclysmic magic, it's triggered by a character operating what the source calls a Rube Goldberg machine.
Essentially pulling a lever that releases water into magma.
Right. They argue it strips the majesty and cosmic terror entirely out of the mythology.
Which brings us to the Balrog, a perfect case study in the tension between Hollywood instinct and mythological rules.
Oh boy.
Because the studio announced that the actor Simon Pegg is voicing a Balrog in season 3.
Simon Pegg, like the guy from Shaun of the Dead and Mission Impossible.
That's the one.
The source is absolutely livid about this casting.
Yeah.
And they cite J.R.R. Tolkien's own writings to explain why. Because in Letter 210, Tolkien explicitly wrote that the Balrog never speaks, makes no vocal sound, and above all, does not laugh or sneer.
And we have to explain why Tolkien made that rule. Balrogs aren't just big monsters. They are ancient, elemental spirits of corrupted fire and shadow.
Yeah.
They predate the world itself. The moment you give them a voice, especially a recognizable celebrity voice, you humanize them.
Exactly. You reduce an entity of cosmic dread into just another talking bad guy.
The source views this as ultimate key jangling, flashing something shiny and familiar, a famous actor, a recognizable monster at the audience, while completely ignoring the underlying mechanics of why that monster was terrifying in the first place.
Now, these structural changes lead directly into something much deeper, which is a fundamental clash in philosophy.
Yes.
But before we dive into this next section, I want to be incredibly clear to our listeners. We are strictly reporting on the claims made in our source material.
Right.
We are not endorsing these views, nor are we condemning them. We are neutrally examining the anatomy of the argument itself.
And that's a vital distinction, because cultural and political grievances form a massive pillar of this backlash.
Yep.
According to the commentary, Tolkien explicitly intended his work to be a mythology for England, rooted deeply in European history and tradition. But the source argues the show completely abandons that intention in order to prioritize modern 21st century representation.
Right. They point to a quote from one of the actresses on the show, who described her casting as a necessary redress of balance within the fantasy genre.
The source rejects this approach entirely. The author heavily criticizes the inclusion of diverse casting, specifically mentioning the addition of elves of color, dwarves of color, and the Harfoots.
Right.
The commentary frames this not as a positive step for inclusion, but as a forced artificial projection of the modern world onto a text where it historically and geographically does not belong.
And the source uses highly cynical nicknames to express this frustration.
Oh.
They refer to an elf character who falls in love with a human as Don Lemonless, a play on Legolas, to mock what they see as modern political messaging superseding the narrative.
This ideological critique extends heavily into the portrayal of the villains, too. The source mocks the creation of a good orc named Maruk, and the entire concept presented in the show of kinder, gentler orcs who supposedly just want to settle down in the suburbs of Mordor and raise families.
Right, because introducing moral relativity into this specific universe fundamentally breaks the internal logic.
Yes.
The source is adamant that in Tolkien's lore, orcs are not just a misunderstood rival nation. They are purely evil. They are elves or men who were tortured, mutilated, and magically corrupted by dark lords into literal mockeries of life.
They have no redeeming qualities because they are the physical manifestation of corruption.
Exactly.
The commentary claims the softening of the orcs is a direct reaction to modern activist academics. The source specifically cites a university course, which suggested that the treatment of evil characters in the original books follows a tradition of anti-African antipathy.
Okay.
The author vehemently disagrees with this academic lens, arguing it is a profound misreading of the text through modern racial politics.
So, objectively speaking, the source views the intrusion of these 21st century social politics as entirely incompatible with the original work.
Right.
They describe the foundational text as being built on traditional, romantic, Christian, and masculine values. And they argue that the television adaptation has systematically replaced those pillars with what they call romantic feminine energy and modern social dynamics.
It is a massive ideological collision, and it leads to the final and perhaps most tragic point the source makes.
Yeah.
They pivot from what they absolutely hate about the show to what they wish the show was.
Oh, this part's fascinating.
Because they argue that the original lore, the actual appendices that Amazon paid $250 million for, is infinitely more exciting than the soapy drama the writers invented.
The source describes Tolkien's actual lore as metal as F, and compares the show's adaptation to pop punk or soap opera schlock.
Right.
They lay out these massive missed opportunities. Like, let's look at the Second Age, which the show is currently adapting.
Okay.
Instead of a love triangle on a raft, the source points out, we could have seen the brutal forging of the rings, where Sauron literally uses the elven smith Celebrimbor's arrow-ridden body as a battle standard, marching his armies across Middle-earth.
Wow. Or deep dive into the fall of Numenor.
Yes.
The source points out that this didn't need to be a slow-paced political drama. It could have been a genuine Game of Thrones-style thriller on a mythological scale.
I mean, you have a usurper king, Ar-Pharazôn, who takes a Sauron prisoner. But Sauron acts as a whisperer, slowly convincing the king to perform human sacrifices to the dark god Morgoth.
And the scale of that story is insane.
It's massive. It culminates in the king building a massive armada and literally invading heaven, the Undying Lands. And God responds to this invasion by taking the flat world, turning it round, and wiping the entire civilization off the face of the earth.
Now that is huge cinematic storytelling.
Absolutely.
The source doesn't stop there either. They excitedly recount lore from the First Age just to emphasize the sheer scale the studio is ignoring.
Yeah.
They mention Ancalagon the Black, a dragon so unbelievably massive that when he fell from the sky, he crushed a volcanic mountain range.
Unbelievable.
The source claims he would make the legendary dragons from A Song of Ice and Fire look like chicken strips.
Chicken strips, I love that.
Yeah.
They also bring up Ungoliant, a primordial giant spider who literally drank the light of the two trees that illuminated the world.
Right.
She was so terrifying and powerful that she made Morgoth, the ultimate Dark Lord, the being Sauron used to work for, cry out in fear until his army of Balrogs had to save him.
Or what about Fingolfin?
Oh, yeah.
An elven king riding entirely alone across a volcanic wasteland to knock on the front door of hell itself.
Go cool.
He challenges the Dark Lord to single combat, knowing with absolute certainty he is going to die, but still manages to hack at him enough to give a literal god a permanent limp.
And the irony here is palpable. I mean, the studio spent well over $1 billion trying to invent interpersonal drama and modern political allegories to keep audiences engaged.
Yeah.
Yet the author argues that the original text they bought access to already contains action, political intrigue, and tragic heroism on a scale far grander than anything a modern television writer's room has conjured up.
It's the ultimate what could have been.
It really is. So we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've dissected the behind-the-scenes business strategies, the profound lore deviations, and the deep cultural and ideological divides driving this fandom inferno.
Right.
But I want to tie this back to you, the listener. Why should you care about this if you don't even watch the show or if you've never read the books?
Because this scenario is a pristine case study in intellectual property management in the modern era.
Exactly. It shows what happens when a massive global corporation buys a universally beloved property, but then attempts to fundamentally alter its DNA to fit a different demographic or a modern streaming algorithm.
Yeah.
You end up with $1 billion product that is essentially at war with its own core consumer base.
It's a cautionary tale about the friction between legacy art and modern content creation.
100%.
And it leaves us with a truly vital question to ponder. The highly critical source we analyzed today insists that this work is a mythology for England.
Right.
They argue it is something that should remain perfectly frozen in its original cultural, traditional, and religious values, completely untouched by modern sensibilities.
Protect the original painting with microscopic cotton swabs, never adding a new color.
Exactly. But historically speaking, if you look at true mythologies, whether that's the Greek pantheon, the Norse myths, or Arthurian legends, they survived across millennia precisely because they weren't frozen in amber. They were constantly altered, remixed, and adapted to reflect the changing values, politics, and anxieties of whoever was telling the story around the fire at that specific time.
That is a brilliant point. The stories evolved as the audience evolves.
So the question I would leave you with is this. Does a modern adaptation of a beloved work owe its absolute loyalty strictly to the original author's specific cultural context? Or is the very nature of a mythology that it eventually outgrows its creator, belonging to, and morphing with the world at large?
Is it a fragile museum exhibit? Or a living, breathing cathedral where every new generation builds their own stained glass window, even if the original architect would hate the design? It's something to mull over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.